anything really matter?
What does it matter? I mean, it matters.
Well, it does matter.
What's the matter?
It matters.
Well, it does matter a lot.
Does it matter to you? Does it matter to you? Does it matter to you? I mean, what does it matter?
And that matters a lot.
What does it matter?
What's the matter? Does it matter to you?
It matters to me.
Hello, and welcome to Tallahassee Matters. I'm Tamara Smith. On today's show, we have two segments to share with you. Later, we'll visit a Parks and Recreation horticulture crew as they tackle a big lawn maintenance job. But our first segment is a special tribute to our Tallahassee area World War II veterans. 79 veterans took an expenses-paid day trip to Washington, D.C. to visit the World War II Memorial and other patriotic sites. We attended the festivities connected to the trip and visited with some of the veterans afterward. Let's take a look.
Honor Flight is a single-minded program which its only purpose is to fly World War II veterans to Washington, D.C. for free. World War II ended about 70 years ago, and the World War II Memorial was only completed in 2005. So most of these veterans have never seen the memorial that was built for them in Washington.
I was in New Jersey with the 44th Division, and Roosevelt called us up in 1940, and I'm one of the last ones left. And we was only going to be going for 1 year, but 5 years later, we came home. But we had a victory.
That's impressive.
We only went for 1 year, but it was the longest damn year we ever put in.
There you go, sir.
Oh, okay.
You have a good trip.
Thank you very much.
You have a good trip. Extra large, please.
Extra large?
The organization of getting the flight together was a real mammoth task.
And he must already have his name. Oh, no.
We've been working on it for nearly 2 years now. It's about 18 months or more that the board has been meeting. We've been raising funds. We've been planning, working with the Honor Flight Network, which is the national organization for Honor Flight. There's been hundreds and hundreds of hours that went into the preparation and planning for this one flight.
Today's event, I think it's great. Everything is taken care of. I mean, it is a real nice thing. No way that you can say anything bad about this.
Well, I've heard a lot about it and looking for a great day. Served in World War II and was a bombardier navigator on a B-17 bomber stationed in Italy.
I joined the Army in 1940 and I spent 3 years here in Tallahassee. I worked in a mess hall. In November of '43, they shipped a bunch of them over to England. I was there 1 year in France, and about 2 weeks in Germany. And a lot of my friends died, of course, but I never was up close to the war. I was always stayed behind because that's where they put me as a mess sergeant and cook. I think this is great, they're doing this for the soldiers. I never did expect anything, but we're fighting the war for our country.
Go through that where the American flags are. Now, easy, one lane at a time, no rush. We're not going to leave without you. One lane. Everybody, let's go.
The doors open here at the airport at 5:30 in the morning. The funny thing about that was there were some veterans that had been sitting in the parking lot since 3 a.m. with their family because they wanted to be here to be sure they didn't miss it.
The day of the Honor Flight event, our day really got started very early. Most airport staff that were working the event were here about 4 a.m. To get everything prepped and ready to go. The Honor Flight aircraft actually arrived in Tallahassee about 4:45 a.m. We worked closely with all the key stakeholders to make sure everyone got checked in safely, processed through security, the aircraft got loaded, and then got off on time.
It's a one-day trip. We left at 7 in the morning. We got back about 10 that night. Not all honor flight groups are in one-day trips like we did. If you are west of the Mississippi, because of the length of the flight and how long it takes, a lot of times they'll stay over 1 or 2 nights in Washington. We tried to make it a shorter trip. It's not as involved, not as expensive. And then the other thing is it made it easier on the veteran because it was just a one-day disruption of their schedule. When we arrived, we were greeted by several military folks and just people in the DC area that had come out to welcome them to DC. We boarded 3 separate buses and we had a police escort.
That's right.
We also got to go places on a short driving tour of Washington, D.C. that the general public is not allowed to go on. Our first stop was the World War II Memorial, and we stayed there for 2 hours so that they could see every aspect of the memorial. We had a short ceremony where we laid a wreath at the Florida column at the memorial, and we also had a group picture. It was about 172 people total in one group picture, which was pretty cool. Then after that, they were allowed to move around the memorial, see what they wanted to see. Also at that particular time, Earl Morris, who's the founder of Honor Flight Network, came to greet the veterans and talk to them.
Something a little bit different about World War II veterans. I have found that World War II veterans are the most humble, most appreciative, most stoic, and most patriotic people that walk the face of this earth.
And also Senator Bob Dole, who's retired, came to greet the veterans because he was a World War II veteran himself. And he tries to come out and meet a lot of the veterans. And then we moved to the Lincoln Memorial, Korean War Memorial, and Vietnam Memorial.
Guards! Halt!
After that, we went to Arlington National Cemetery. These veterans were really honored to be able to witness that changing of the guard at the Tomb of the Unknown, because in that tomb is one World War II veteran, and all of these veterans lost friends and companions in World War II. Our last stop of the day was at the Iwo Jima Memorial, or what's called the Marine Memorial. We actually had 2 veterans on this flight that were on Iwo Jima, and this was extremely meaningful for them to see this memorial. From there, we went back to the airport. At the airport, we were greeted by Miss Maryland, who gave each veteran a hug and a kiss. One of the things that we didn't plan but just happened, there were over 100 active military that were on their way to Afghanistan, that were along the route going to the gate. And that was a priceless moment. You just can't plan that and create that. On the way back, we had mail call.
And we're about to distribute your mail call to you right now.
Mail call was something that was very special back in the war. Any war, what we did was we asked friends and family of each veteran to write them letters about their service, about how much they appreciated them, their service in World War II, and just how much they appreciated them as a person.
This is better than the old mail call back during the war.
It was a surprise for the veterans on this trip. We didn't tell them we were doing it. We also got letters from different senators and representatives and just different people that really appreciated their service, and it turned out to be one of the most touching moments of the entire trip.
I'm real proud of you, and I love you even more because of who you are. The best wife you've ever had. Love, Mom.
When we arrived home, we had a hero's welcome. The Tallahassee Fire Department did a water arch salute with their fire trucks. Everybody cheered when that water salute began. They were just so thrilled with that. For these men and women that served us so brilliantly in the past, to feel like they are cared about, that they're appreciated, has been very tremendous for these guys.
These guys that got a chance to go on this flight, I think it's well deserved. It shows that we haven't forgotten them, and this country is standing behind our veterans.
I think this is the greatest thing that they've come down the pike for the Second World War veterans. We're losing so many of them. It's a great program, and it's long overdue.
Both of our fathers are veterans, So we are very excited to be here to support the honor flight coming back from Washington, D.C. Always supporting our veterans and the military is something very important and dear to our hearts.
The most common theme that I have heard from all the veterans is, I had no idea that so many people in our community here cared about what we did during World War II. It's really been a life-changing experience for many of them.
This whole trip was that way. Leaving here, the reception we got in Baltimore, the reception we got all along the way, we never had anything like that before. I graduated from high school in 1944. World War II, I lost a brother in that war. His service, of course, inspired me to get in. I enlisted in January of 1945 in the Navy. I'd really wanted to get into the naval aviation, but it was closed at the time. I got out of the Navy in late 1946, and I went to college and took ROTC at the University of Kentucky and was commissioned second lieutenant in 1950 and was called in for the Korean War and decided after I'd got into aviation that I liked that, and so I stayed in until retirement in 1970. When I came back from the Korean War, you were basically ignored. In the Vietnam War, you were treated like, I don't know what to say. There was so much distaste for that war that the person in uniform, they took it out on them. So in a way, this particular trip made up for all of that. It was very gratifying to all of us.
I guess what motivated me to actually say yes on this trip was my guardian. I think he was the only grandson paramedic fireman on the whole trip.
I didn't even know I could be a guardian when we first got the paperwork, and my mom happened to come in town and reread it and said, "Hey, you can go on this." And I was stunned. I was like, okay, well, let's do that. I grew up in Atlanta, so I only got to spend little bits of time with him, which we didn't discuss the war a whole lot, but since I've moved to town and have dinner with him quite frequently, I've learned little bits and pieces and try to pick his brain about his time and where he was and what he's done.
I was in the United States Coast Guard, and I was put on a Coast Guard subchaser, an 83-footer. For 6 months, I patrolled the East Coast, checked all incoming ships, and kept it free from submarines as best we could. And then our ship was put on a larger ship, and we were transferred to Eniwetok in the Marshall Islands in the Pacific. I stayed there for a year. We patrolled up and down and protected the area out there. When I first came back, there was no great welcome, no you did a good job, no thank yous. Everybody that could was trying to get back into school. I ended up in Tallahassee. My sister went to school here at Florida State College for Women. I was going to Tulane in New Orleans, and she invited me over to meet this young girl. So I came over, and we've been married almost 65 years now, 65 years in July. And I started a little linen supply company here in Tallahassee, Apex Linen Service, and ran that until retirement. During that time, I had the privilege of serving on the commission for 6 years and serving May of 2 years. And then when this opportunity for this trip came along and they were honoring veterans going, I just couldn't turn it down. It turned out to be a most fantastic experience and so well done.
They treated us like royalty. And they treated me so special just because I was only a woman, I guess. And then just because I was in the Marines, that seemed to be so extra special for some reason or other. I don't know why. I was in the Marine Corps in 44 and 45. And most of the time I was in Screws Regiment. And that was the office that took care of the paperwork for the fellows that went on to officers' candidates at school. I don't know really why I joined the Marine Corps, but my dad was chairman of the war board, and we were all girls, and he was sending boys off to war. I know they kind of bothered Dad, and that was the main reason. People now seem to think that because I was in the Marine Corps, that was a tough situation. Some people thought boot camp was rough. Of course, I was a farm girl, and I worked hard on the farm, and maybe that's why I didn't find it hard. We were called WRs, Women Reserves. The Waves were in the Navy, the WACs were in the Army. We were in the Marine Corps. Gene was from Florida, and through my office, he went to Officer Candidate School, although I didn't realize that at the time. He came back, we dated for 3 months, we got married, and then he went on to Guam. But I got out of the service before he did because I got pregnant, and so I got on a pregnancy discharge. And then when he got out, we came here back to Florida.
We had a wonderful time. The War Memorial, that was my favorite thing. I got to meet Robert Dole, and everything was just fantastic. During the war, I felt that we ought to contribute. That's the reason I joined, to fight for my country. I entered, I was 17 years old, and about a week or two before I was 18, and I went in Naval Air Station in Great Lakes, Illinois. I went to school for a radioman, and I went to a gunnery school. And then from there, I got in the B-24s. I flew 12 missions over the coast of France during the war. Our main function was looking for German submarines. I was very afraid. I was a gunner and a radio operator. We flew 12-hour missions. I was scared, quite worried I wouldn't come back. I don't know how I did it, but I did.
I went in service 14th of January 1946. I was discharged February 1947. I was in the quartermaster, and my duty was to supply stuff to go to the soldiers that needed in the wartime. In 46, there was segregation. It was a different feeling. I was trying to avoid a lot of that situation. I was looking for something better, and I would not re-enlist in the service. When the service was desegregated in 48, it made a difference for the young black men that go into service then, because things was very difficult. Young black men had nothing to do but to work on the farm, and if they go into service, they could make a livelihood out of service, and that's what happened to the young generation back in those days. As I grow older, I wish many times that when I went in the Army that I should have stayed, because I would have been able to make some kind of mark for my country. The few veterans that are still alive should have been recognized for what they did. I have never seen so many men that were tear-eyed for how they was treated and how they appreciated this. It was an experience that I never had and never thought that I would have. I got teary-eyed for people coming up, shaking my hands and hugging me and saying thank you. And it's very difficult for me to talk about this now. And it was very touching, but I tell you, it was the time of my life.
My branch of the service was the Army. I was an explosive specialist. My job in the Army was to take and disarm booby traps, lay minefields, clear minefields, disarm anti-personnel mines, anti-tank mines, things of this nature. This trip that we had, it was a tremendous hand of gratitude to us, and I was honored to be a part of it. It was really great, the way the people said thank you. We were over at the unknown soldier's grave, and this young man and his wife come up to me, and he said, "Thank you, sir." And he says, "For what you've done." Of course, I said, "Thank you," back, and he said, and the two little girls, and they looked at me and they said, could we have our picture taken with you? And we got the picture taken. It's those things like that that made this trip so special. I just certainly appreciate the interest that the people have in us, but I wish we could be more compassionate to each other than what we are. I believe our main thing in this country here is to accept one another and love the country itself and be involved in things that will take and improve the country, not just for me, not just for John over here, but for the country. Because in my estimation, if we don't have a country, we don't have nothing.
God shed his grace, shed his grace on thee. Yes, did he crown that good? He did it all.
Probably one of the best aspects of the trip was watching the generation sit together on the plane and just listen to the veterans and listening to their stories. It was a life-changing event, I'm sure, for everybody that participated. It was definitely for me.
America, my God shed his grace on me.
Honor Flight had a very special place in my heart. It's something I really feel strongly about for the veterans. I think they need to be recognized. Later we're going to look at doing Korean War and Vietnam veterans. I think they all did a great service for their country, and we all ought to be appreciative for that.
Does it matter to you?
It matters to me.
Over 550 children in Tallahassee are missing the simple joys of being a kid.
I miss having my own bed. I miss having our own house.
Join the Change for Change program by simply adding a monthly contribution to your city utility account. For the cost of just a gallon of milk, you can help all our kids enjoy the simple, extraordinary things about just being a kid.
Does it matter to you?
It matters to me.
Welcome back to Tallahassee Matters. I'm Tamara Smith. Now that summer's upon us, it's lawn maintenance time for a lot of folks, including the folks at the Parks and Recreation Department. We caught up with them as they removed and replaced a lawn right next to City Hall and asked them a few questions about lawns and lawn care.
What we're doing today is we're replacing the St. Augustine grass that's up here on the south side of City Hall. What we call the courtyard. What's been going on the past few years, it's had all these issues which St. Augustine grass is prone to have. It gets chinch bugs every year and we're having to fight it with chemicals. And then we put this new landscaping in, and when we did that, we were having to water the new landscaping, and the grass was getting too much water also at the same time. So it's been in decline for like 5 years now. So we've decided to put a less maintenance intensive grass up here. We're going to put centipede up here instead. It's less costly, uses less water, uses less herbicides, uses less fertilizers, uses less chemicals in general. Today we're just taking out the old sod. The steps involved in it, we started with killing the old grass because it had a lot of weeds in it, and we wanted to make sure the weeds were dead also. So we came up there and we sprayed it with Roundup. So our second step was to get a sod cutter and come up here and cut all the old sod out and remove it. We've got about 5,300 square feet. We're thinking it should take us the better part of today to get all this out of here. And then we're gonna come in here, they're gonna bring some new centipede sod in, and we're thinking that would take 1 day to put down too. After we get this old sod out, we're gonna have to do some hand grading and some hand leveling. We're hoping to have the whole job done in 2 days. People should not resod anytime they feel like it. They should try different things to try to keep the sod that they have viable. We have quite a few different areas that we can go to get information. There's the University of Florida website, the IFAS site. We have an extension office here in town. that if you wanted to call them, they would be more than happy to help you. They can do different things like soil testing, and if you have critters and you bag one up and take it to them, they can tell you what it is. But there's all kinds of things on the internet that you can look at. Usually I just find a search engine, punch in something, and it comes right up. Right now you can see all these guys out here are pretty busy, and I'm gonna get back out here and help these guys get all this sod up, and that's it for today. As you can see, this is the second day of our work. We came in here the first day, leveled, put in new irrigation heads from ones that were bad or needed to be relocated. And now we're laying sod on the second day. And we've got centipede sod going down here. Different grasses are suited for different spaces. If you have a sports field, a Bermuda grass would be good for that because it tends to recover a little bit quicker. Edge of a roadway area, Bahia is good because you don't have any irrigation on it, and Bahia tends to just keep on growing no matter what with just a minimal amount of rainfall. We've got centipede going in here, which is more of a natural North Florida type grass. It requires a little less water. It doesn't recover as quickly as the other grasses, but you don't have a lot of people up on this space all the time. If you have a St. Augustine grass, that's a beautiful grass for like your lawns, but it tends to suffer in drought conditions. The roots are real shallow, and it spreads with stolons, which are on top of the ground. And it will dry out quicker, and then you get weed problems, and then it leads to other things. So if you're thinking about planting a grass at your house, a zoysia would be good. Requires less water, better root system, can survive the drought conditions. Once we get this sod laid down, we're gonna have the irrigation going on it almost every day, and that's one of the things when you put down sod, you need to keep it watered for a little while. A week or two. You want to water it every day, and you want to make sure it's watered where below the sod the dirt is moist 3 inches deep underneath the sod. It's actually growing right now, but for it to establish itself in our turf, it's going to take anywhere from 2 weeks to a couple months. I think the main reason people prefer sod to seed is instant gratification. You know, you're going to get that good looking lawn and you're going to get it quick. Seed, there's absolutely nothing wrong with growing certain grasses from seed. Centipede, which this is what we're putting down right here, you can grow from seed. You're not going to grow Bermuda from seed. Bermuda grass, you're going to have sod. St. Augustine, you will have to use sod for St. Augustine grass. Zoysia, you know, you're going to have sod for that. So the main thing to having a good looking lawn is to know all the good cultural practices that you have to sustain your lawn. Some of the good cultural practices are water when needed. You don't have to water too much. Fertilize when needed, but you don't want to fertilize too much. You're contributing to the decline of your lawn if you fertilize too much. You won't develop a good root system. You want that lawn to stress a little bit where it's going to have to drive those roots down into the ground. The better root system, the better lawn you're going to have. Certain grasses have different mowing heights. That information is on the internet. The parts of my job I like the most, I've always enjoyed mowing, weed eating, and edging the most. Keeping everything looking good is what I really enjoy the most. Laying sod is probably last on the list. You know, nobody here likes to do it, but it's a necessary thing that we have to do sometimes. Everybody on this crew has really busted their humps to get this job done. We've got some guys that are more experienced than others, and they've been kind of showing the less experienced guys a little bit more about it, but we all strive to do a good job and keep everything looking nice downtown for all of the citizens of the community.
That's all for this episode of Tallahassee Matters. For WCOT, I'm Tamara Smith. Thanks for watching.